Well, hello today on the power of our story. I am so happy to have Hiram Figueroa with us. Normally we have this in a group setting, but because of time constraints, we're going to actually have a one-on-one conversation, and I'm excited to do this. My name is Sarah Carell. I am the founder of The Power of Our Story, and it's really coffee and conversation for our protectors. It's a place of safety for people to connect, and just a place to know that other people get it. You can process your journey in a place of safety. So anyway, Hiram, I want to welcome you. It's really good to see you.
Hey, personally, want to thank you, Sarah. I mean, don't mind, that's my work computer is about to go off. So yes, thank you for having me on there. It's a pleasure. We would normally have this in a group setting, but I really am humbled by this and to your program, and especially to the veterans and the first responders, which I come from that type of community. It's imperative that we have this kind of dialogue to be able to share the story and to empathize what kind of backstories and lifestyles and personal challenges the veteran community and the first responders really go through, that it's pretty much untold or unseen until there's a traumatic event where there's suicide or there's a murder, whatever, something that's permanently. So for you being an advocate and then creating this program, it gives people a direction, an outlet to be able to engage. And they feel that by looking at you and trusting you and listening to how you present yourself, there's a opportunity of trust. So in the opportunity of trust, people can actually listen to this and say, this is pretty much sacred ground because you keep the standards. And for us, we, getting to know each other. And then once we get this program done, we'll do one together and we'll get a party started. So.
All right. Right. I love that. And I love what you said about sacred ground too. I mean, I appreciate that intro. And I feel the same way. I really want this to be an arena where people really feel that sacred ground where everybody's really for each other, really has each other's back. And wherever you're at in maybe the healing arena, or really, just want to help, just really want to help, because our protectors really need to have a place of safety. That's what I feel. And I was so interested actually in talking to you, Hiram, because here you are, you're a United States Marine Corps veteran. You've had great jobs, and so a lot of life experience. And then you have this hosting podcast
Yes.
On LinkedIn.
Sorry about that. I'm swallowing water.
Oh no, that's okay.
Go ahead.
And so you really seem to have a pulse on so much of what's going on, with our veterans, our first responders, what's happening in politics. And you really just have, and I've watched that. I've watched some of your talks, and I'm so interested just to hear your story. What made you want to get into the military? And then what led you to do this podcast? And why do you think it's so successful? You've really hit something.
I'm gonna be very humble. So my story begins back in Brooklyn, New York. I come from a Puerto Rican family, right? First generation, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, back in the 60s. So we all know how the 60s were, pretty much. That type of culture was pretty much black and white in a lot of things. And there wasn't no social media, but to your point, our cultures and understanding how to be American citizens at that time, even though we're American citizens by birth, was very dramatic. So for me, I knew I was different. And the other thing is that as I was growing up, we had a dysfunctional family, a lot of issues. I come from a very dysfunctional family of drug addicts and alcoholics, drug pushers and criminals, petty crime. So I grew up in an environment where back in the 60s and 70s, that was pretty much accepted, right? So what happens is that when you're surrounded in that culture, like anything else as a kid, you think of it, when you see it day to day, it becomes normal. It's normal to you, right? until you step away from that culture and you understand that you're not what you think you are, because things are not really normal and it's pretty much dysfunctional. What it leads me to be is that we're pretty much dirt poor, and we were on welfare for a long time. So, I dropped out of high school, I worked, and when I dropped out of high school, it was more or less, you're speaking originally to a dropout from ninth grade with fifth grade reading level and fourth grade grammar. So the education factor is pretty much, but the street smarts kind of took over the survival skills for me to be able to improvise things, to be able to do that. Now, this is when I was 15, 16, when they had turned 17, it was more or less the family way. You could join the Army. Everybody could join. No offense to the Army. I work for the Army right now. But back then it was like, hey, you could join the Army. Oh, no, the Marine Corps is too hard. I said, no, screw that. I decided to join the Marine Corps. But the caveat to that was I had to have an adult sign me over. So I broke my mom's heart. So I joined the Marine Corps at 17, spent 12 years in the Marine Corps. I did a lot of different things, seen a lot of things. I kind of grew up in the Marine Corps. I still had a lot of anger issues. I had early stages of PTSD from dysfunctional family. So when we talk about first responders, when we talk about veterans, there's different levels of PTSD that kind of contributes to today's PTSD, right? So a lot of people have different forms of PTSD that is traumatic in their lives that kind of triggers things. They could be a sense, a smell, a song, something that you see can actually trigger it. So for me, it was the urban society of me living in a poor neighborhood back in New York and watching domestic violence and everything else. So for me, I understood that it was not a good thing for me. So for me, I decided to join the Marine Corps. Still having the anger and resentment, didn't have any father mentorship to be able to guide me to who I am today. And I took a lot of back roads to think life is easy, and took easy way outs that would pretty much be criminal. But lucky I'm here today for that not to happen. Now, back to your point, right? I learned everything on the fly, but I was pretty much in denial because I didn't take into effect that I was that intelligent enough to be successful, if that makes sense. When you don't have a role model, when you don't have any direction, when you don't have any mentorship, and the Marine Corps was, hey, this is the place to be. This is all you had. So after 12 years, decided they had to leave after the Persian Gulf War. And then what happens from there, where a lot of veterans, as you know, back in the early 90s, we didn't have social media. So transition, everything was pretty much pick up the phone, and cell phones were not even coming in yet. And
right.
rich and famous were driving around with, cell phones about as size as the brick right here. And, wire.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't have those portable smartphones and everything else. So for us, my transition back to society was very hard. I didn't have any coping skills. I didn't have anything else. But the biggest thing that I learned, that I was, let's put it this way, socially ignorant in a way where I was unable to interact with people like yourself, because I grew up in the Marine Corps. So I grew up in the military. So when you grow up in the military and then you're forced to be able to leave society that you're familiar with, you have to learn how to reinvent yourself and have to properly engage and watch how your dialogue is, because as we're talking now, I had a lot of F-bombs and intense conversations with turn off people, even though, hey, I was pretty smart, but my dialogue kind of sucked. My language sucked. My syntax and everything else. I thought I was the smartest guy in the world, but I wasn't. I was lacking in a lot of social graces and education, and especially personal development. But the biggest thing is that I can honestly tell you is that I didn't come to terms with my PTSD, because it started from childhood and then it metastasized to, the Marine Corps, and it kind of carried on. So with all the anger issues and everything else, it's still that component, more or less, of a fight or flight actually destroys relationships, job opportunities, relationships, everything else, because you're so set in your ways, you don't know how to get out of it. Now, moving forward, I worked for UPS for 25 years. I learned how to be able to incorporate myself in corporate America. But the biggest challenge is dealing with, regular people like yourself, because I'm still having that pride that I was in the military. So for a lot of military people that can really relate to this conversation, we don't trust a lot of civilian people because they don't know what we've been through, and they don't know what it is to be able to go through that civilian process of going from civilian into the military, getting back into civilian world, versus people that, oh, I thank you for your service, I appreciate everything, but they don't really understand the dynamics.
Right. Right.
So I hope that makes sense. So with that, it helps us understand where I'm at. With the challenges and everything else, and then working for UPS, I decided to retire because after 25 years, I was spending 19 hours of my life working in corporate America. And UPS is a great company, but I don't think I want to be slave to that. So took government jobs. I had opportunity working for Homeland Security for a little bit. Now I work for the Veterans Administration. So this is where the dynamics kind of changed, right? So I was pretty much mentored by the veterans in the VA hospital in Long Beach. And we're talking back then, 12 years ago, 12 to 14 years ago, World War II veterans were still around. There were quite a bit, Korean veterans, Korean War veterans, and especially the Vietnam veterans. So these type of generations took me under my wing, and they mentored me to be able to who I am today. But still, they gave me some direction. They gave me an opportunity to say, hey, your life is not over. And I stated, how can I pay you back? I said, pay it forward. So for me, it was pretty much, I decided from that point on to be an advocate for veterans' rights. And so for yourself as an advocate,
okay.
So for you as being an advocate for first responders or for the veteran, it's got to hit home, right? You don't take any time off for it. People don't understand when you're an advocate, it's like being a priest or something. You are there 24/7. This is your calling because you've lived through it. You can speak to it. You've kind of reinvented yourself to a point where you can understand and see the challenges of things like that, and give somebody direction and give some proper dialogue that they can help them understand. So for me, that's when I started, and how I wind up on LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn since it first started.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I've been on LinkedIn when it first started. Honestly, it was strictly business. And, at that time, like we're going on 20 years now, pretty much, hey, everybody's doing this, but I decided to be one of the very few back then, the original ones, to be an advocate for veterans and veterans' rights.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
So I've kind of developed myself along with this LinkedIn process because it wasn't happening on Facebook. And I found that LinkedIn back 20 years ago was new and fresh, and it was strictly professional. So what better way to reinvent yourself than put yourself out there? So with that being said, I started developing things. I started doing things for the veterans and remembering the fallen and everything. And it was new for people because they never seen it. So it kind of got to catch all. So fast forward, right? 18 years old, I get a significant group of people that I have following. So I decided to follow somebody else that was doing broadcasts and podcasts. So the reason why I did that was to help myself to articulate and to be able to have a conversation like yourself and to the audience of who I am and what I do. And it also helps me with my ADD and HDHD and my PTSD situation.
Oh, great.
So when people don't understand that we all are built with energy, right? So the energy, you can't destroy it. It has to go somewhere, right? It has to go somewhere. You have to find a purpose. So when I started I was with somebody before and we started doing it together, I found a niche and everything else, and I decided to do it on my own. And as I learned how to start doing it, I found myself holding myself accountable to the general public like yourself. Now you're seeing me virtually speaking, right? Versus looking me at my, LinkedIn profile, and you're visualizing what kind of individual I am because you're reading everything that I am. So in your interpretation, what's this guy all about? This person looks good on paper, but let's eliminate that. And then let's put that on a virtual standpoint or live standpoint. Now you see the person and you're matching it up. Does it make sense of what the profile puts out there versus what the person is actually speaking? Right?
Mhm.
So now you have to be very sincere because you're open for criticism and you're leaving yourself vulnerable for everything else. Possible cancel culture. Hey, you suck. You're a liar. You don't do this. I've had that situation, but you have to overcome it. Now, back to your point, what has helped me become that is been having a conversation just like you and me, right? When I have this conversation, when I was initially doing broadcast podcasts, it was more like, hey, let's talk about this simple situation. There's no commercials, there's no sponsors, there's just you and me, but understand the respect. And let's talk about things that really make sense in society for you and me to have this conversation, a dialogue that we can agree to disagree, but not disrespect each other, right? And we could walk away from learning from each other that based on the conversation, I didn't agree with, but I learned her point of view or his point of view of how they view things.
Yeah.
And this is another tool that can help me understand and personally grow and articulate the story to a point where we can't be so socially ignorant. With the power of social media now at its highest point, with smartphones and streaming and everything, it's imperative to get away from the redundancy of these TV shows or even the headlines of news that constantly reprogram the negative connotation. Now, for me, it's been, having the conversation, I say virtual town hall. You're open to have discussion, but now it's up to you to be able to articulate it because it's my show and I have the power to facilitate it. If you have a question that's legit, I'm going to honor it. But if you don't, I'm just going to bypass it. So that's the capability of doing that. And what I've learned is that it's helped me maintain my composure and has taught me that by articulating, having a conversation, especially now with you, when you're doing it by yourself, it's even harder because you got to catch the ums, the repetitive words that you use and things that people will normally see in a pre-recording that would say the person's not pretty much structured to have a conversation. So when you have a show, and I used to do it a lot, now you just do it by content. If you have a show, you have to be prepared about the content. You have to be able to be open for constructive criticism and negative connotation and expect the backlash and take it as a champ and say, you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
the veteran community, I support wholeheartedly, especially as a first responder, because I was a reserve deputy for like 10 years in LA County. So I really understand that. But to your point, when we talk about, let's talk about the first responders. First responders, people don't understand that's a very touchy situation when we have issues because they have to protect themselves because they're a public servant. So when public servants have issues, guess what? The mortality rate doesn't last that long, or the success rate doesn't last long because they're human too. They have lives, they have problems, they have issues, right? They have challenges. Life happens. But we can't more or less single out a person that chooses that profession to outcast them that they're a bad person because who else is going to do it? So I hope that makes sense to you.
It is. It's a very tricky situation, especially when you don't have an outlet, when you don't have a safe outlet to really talk about really what's going on and that pressure to suffer in silence. And I think that's what really hit my heart for our veteran community, our first responder community, is that there's so much training and suffering in silence, but there's no reboot in, and that's why I'm just impressed by how you really put yourself out there. Whether you felt like you were equipped or not, you just put yourself out there. You put your voice out there. You learned as you went, and and I think that's why I like LinkedIn so much, because I think it really does attract people who are willing to kind of be vulnerable, to really put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can be stronger together as a community to pay it forward or help support where needed. But yeah, I appreciate your journey. That's really interesting. I didn't know that this all started like 20 years ago for you.
Yeah, it started 20 years ago, but let me share something with you. That's the biggest thing that I can tell you. So Dr. Shauna Springer, who's been my psychiatrist for quite some time. We met on
wonderful.
right? She's dealt with the Marine Corps community.
Mhm.
So she sponsored me on having this Gallium Stella blockage for PTSD. So I can't pronounce it right now, but it was founded in I have the co-founder with me on LinkedIn. He's from, Walter Reed Medical Center, as officer. So let me share something with you so the audience can understand. There's opportunities to be able to do that, but you got to be able to find the resources, and you got to be able to take a chance on resetting your life. So with me, this happened in January. I was recommended, it was pretty much sponsored. Insurances don't pay it, but I went to a clinic in Encinitas with Dr. Howe, who's great. And what they did was pretty much I'll break it down to you. It's like going to the dentist, right? You go do the cleaning, right? They're going to put the Novocaine in your gums to numb it in their cheek. But they're going to numb everything, and everything else is drooling, but they're going to clean your teeth. And after a while, the Novocaine is going to go away. So it's the same concept. What happens is you get 2 injections in the back of your carotid artery. That goes up to your brain. So for me, they gave me 2. It was a session for about a good 20 minutes, an hour. So what happens is that goes to the right side of your brain. What happens is, like Novocaine, it kind of freezes. It freezes the right side of your brain, and it hits the amygdala, which triggers the flight or fight situation that you have. So you know that everybody has that amygdala where you have that 6th sense. It's a flight or fight situation when we have that level of stress, right? Women are very intuitive to that, because what happens is women can internally understand everything because of their 6th sense. Men don't have that concept. We suck at that, right? We react. That women can communicate, they internalize things, they can feel that 6th sense, they know when things are not happening, and they can read it right away. We suck at that. So back to my point. So when I had that treatment, what happens is the symptoms is you get your face is like a mini stroke, a droopy face with a bloodshot eye. So at that time when I was given that injection, right, I was prior to that, I was always on edge and super intense. You haven't heard me curse this whole time. You haven't heard me like raise my voice and get like super intense to the
I have
point.
not. Nope.
Right.
I don't think I ever have.
No.
Yeah, none of your talks.
So prior to that, right, prior to me doing the broadcast of it was F-bombs this or F is shit this or whatever the case. So this particular treatment, just one treatment, and eventually I'll get another treatment. And then this is later in my life. And I'm so grateful that this type of medicine and technology is around, not only for me, but for other individuals. Even it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate anyone, women. It could be early child that has a traumatic event. It could be for the elderly that have harbored these ill feelings. It could be, significant high tier level first responders like SWAT or high rescues that have seen the carnage, that have lived with their nightmares and everything else. They suffer in silence, right? But they don't know how to do it. So what's their recourse? They use alcoholism, gambling, infidelity, everything else. They become too complacent or they become suicidal. So it's not a cure-all, but there's avenues of resources that can help you out. Now, getting back to what I'm sharing with you is that once I had that, I can honestly tell you, Sarah, the second shot, I felt like, when you have a deep tissue massage, your whole body goes limp. Like you could feel the weight of your shoulders just go off. Like that was so good. So my wife drove me back, and the doctor said, you can't drive. And I agree, you can't drive back. So I pretty much fell asleep. I can tell you, and I advocate this, is that within 24 to 48 hours, I felt the difference. And I was more or less, the whole treatment is to help reset your brain. So,
amazing.
So when people don't understand, your mind is constantly going. Imagine that your brain is hot and it's going, and then it freezes up with like Novocaine. It just freezes up for about 6 to 8 hours. So it pauses it. Now, when it pauses it, it's not a cure, but it kind of takes the edge off what you're constantly being intense about. Even though you don't mean to be intense, right? And you've seen people that are naturally intense because they've had issues in the past, right? And they're very defensive.
Yeah.
So this opportunity allows you to help reset that program. It's not a cure-all, but it takes the edge off and it helps you center things. And that's what I do. And that's what's happening since we've been, since January.
It seemed, oh, so you got the second one in January?
Well, I
Or
got the first one in January.
the first one, that is so interesting. So, and I can imagine too, I have heard about that, the Stella ganglia block, I think it's called, like you were saying.
Ganglia block. That's exactly. It was founded over there, an Army doctor. He's one of the co-founders.
Uh-huh.
And Dr. Shauna Springer, because she's worked with a lot of combat veterans in the Marine Corps in Camp Pendleton, and they love her. They call her.
She's awesome.
She's
Yeah.
awesome. So we've had that, and she recommended, and so I give her the kudos for it, because I'll tell you, that treatment is not cheap. It's not. It's not cheap. It's not covered by insurance.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to tell you this right now. I won't disclose the amount, but I can tell you it's not cheap. It's not covered by insurance. But I can honestly tell you this for you and your audience. It's better than taking meds every freaking night to put you out to sleep to feel like a zombie. Yeah. Because the chemical imbalances of the medication, like in the VA, they give us medications in bulk. So what happens is, where it's there for your liking, but why would I need it when I can find other resources? Yeah. But if you notice, people that have the priorities mixed up, if you can invest and go into Vegas, if you got issues medically, your health is your wealth, right? Your mental health is the most, significant, priceless commodity you have. Nobody can take away your memories and your thought process and your personal growth. Why not reinvest in something that can help you prolong your lifespan, right?
Love that. Well-being.
Yeah, your well-being. And then what happens is that when people see that, then they're pretty much medically at peace, but not completely at peace, because everybody has their different ways of finding peace. And this is what I recommend to the first responder community, because they have the capabilities of doing that, but it's a matter of choice, right? I'm not going to force it upon you like they force the vaccines, right? I don't want to force that, but these are options. It's guaranteed. It's not guaranteed, but I can tell you it's like a 95% success rate. I leave that out there because there's always that 5%, right? You always got to leave that out there, but the success rate is there. And, the doctor was waiting for me to have an emotional breakdown. And I actually didn't have an emotional breakdown until 3 days later.
Oh, interesting. So it was a little delayed, a little more than normal, or?
It's a little delayed more. Some, the Dr. Howe told me that he had a Marine that had about 6 deployments to Afghanistan. So, and pretty much, he went to the VA and everything else. They finally put him in there. And then he had the first treatment on the right-hand side of his brain. And then the second time he came in, he came with his therapist because the therapist couldn't believe the improvement. Oh, wow. It's very interesting. So for you having this program, for others to understand the significance of the first responder community suffering from silence, the veteran community suffering from silence, or they have too much testosterone, or the red flag is, hey, you all right? I'm good. I already know you're not good when you say that. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense for you. I don't want to take. Yeah, I appreciate you breaking it down and making it personal. And I didn't know that about the Stella ganglia block, that you actually did that. I've seen other people share about that. I know that Doc Springer talks about that. And I definitely am somebody that trusts her. So if she thinks it's worthy too, then I'm definitely paying attention. Yeah, that is, well, so I'm curious, with everything that you have gone through, your whole process. And I have to say again, I really appreciate your courage, because you are
definitely somebody that just puts yourself out there, you know, and especially now when there's just a lot of stuff out there, you know, a lot of criticism, and, you know, I just appreciate that you do that. I think you're, again, helping other people articulate their own journey, help processing their own journey when somebody else gives them the language just by sharing their own story. One thing that I'm asking people a lot is, what would you tell your younger self if you could mentor somebody now, or if somebody mentored you at the time? Is there anything that sticks out that you would want to tell your younger self?
You took my line away. I normally ask that question.
Oh, you do? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, we're on the same page.
So now that it's on me, right? I'll give you a good scenario, Sarah. And, you know, we don't discuss women's age, but for me at 62, right? I didn't think I would live this long.
Oh, why not?
I was notorious. I was a bad kid. I was living on the edge. I didn't do a lot of hard drugs, but drinking and violence and everything else. What would I tell myself, the younger self? Go see a mentor. Align with someone who's successful.
Nice.
Align yourself with somebody who's successful. If you want to be successful, find a person that you can emulate and understand that type of love language that can change the dynamics and reinvent yourself. If you're not into the education, find something that would help you personally grow to a point that you be a best version of yourself.
Love that.
So
okay.
So for a lot of people, if you understand, right, reading books creates leaders. But if you're around a level of people that are up there, that have extreme leadership, extreme personal growth, and you're already separating yourself from the masses of the local people that are constantly doing the same thing of circle of insanity and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
You know? And then it's like, when they see you changing or growing, then they feel uncomfortable. What are you doing this? And it's your life and journey. So back to me, had I had a strong mentor, someone that would constantly hold me accountable, to hold the standards, to hold the candle to me and say, hey, you're there, but you can do better, because I see that. Positive reinforcement today is so important in today's society, in this woke society, especially kids who are grown up and seeing just this. Right? We've come from a generation, we've evolved from that, so we can decipher that, to the point that a lot of people today are just like leaving the phones just to have a shutdown, to have a personal engagement, because today's society with millennials and everything, they want to make money, but they can't socially interact because it's too stressful for them to have a virtual conversation, because this is face-to-face. Now, because it's face-to-face, it's kind of protective. But we forget the old school days when we actually meet someone, and then you've been around, Sarah, you can tell, you can feel somebody's vibe by the way they carry themselves, the way they say, you can feel the energy, right? You can feel the energy of who they are.
Yeah.
Right? Even before COVID, the handshake, or more or less standing, oh, I got a bad vibe about this person, or this person doesn't sign. See, and then people are just hiding away from that because we've been inconveniently covered by COVID. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we are a dying breed. What it gets back to, and my point is getting back to the first responder community and the veteran community. We are a short community, a small community that we can only relate within ourselves, because they understand. People on the outside looking in are passing judgment, but they're not doing the job.
Right.
They're not doing the job. They're not living with the person, right? They're not seeing the challenges, and they don't love themselves, and they don't have enough empathy to be able to share that and understand, but they want to pass judgment,
Yeah, we're not seeing the whole picture. And I think that it's so unfortunate, because I know for me as a civilian, being able to hear the stories of our veterans, hearing the stories of our law enforcement and firefighters, it brings in a whole dynamic, not just these little narratives, but a whole dynamic. And I think that's what really compels me to get these stories out there, to have this YouTube channel. Like, if you really want to understand, listen to these human being stories.
Mhm.
Then you will really understand. Then you can, we really can have an intelligent conversation here. I mean, we definitely could talk a lot about that, right? That's another rabbit hole. Yeah.
To your point, look, everybody's kind of shocked and awe what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Look, and this is what I stated when in one of my live shows. I spoke to a Ukrainian live about 4 or 5 weeks ago, right? When the war started. And he's in a different location, and he broke it down to where things are. And we both agree that we are reliving 75 years of what the Holocaust has brought us, that we've read in books. Right? So as kids, we had the encyclopedias. They was taught in school, and then to a certain point, and then with the Holocaust, and I got to use that this point. And this is what my point I'm getting at. We only read this now with technology and social media and the news. We're witnessing everything else, and our society overall, to a point, is numb because it hasn't affected us. So that should tell you where the direction of our society is. If this is a new version of genocide, can you imagine what the first responders are going through? Can you imagine what the veteran community is going through? Remember what happened almost a year ago when they pulled out in Afghanistan, and we were like, what was this all about? So
Yeah.
people don't understand the backlash of what's going on. And people understand it is like, we are, as Americans, we should be proud, but we are the most selfish society there is, because we consume a lot to a point, and we think about ourselves because we are taught that way, and we are full of everything else that we have. But when we see something that's very significant on the other side of the world, we can't even grasp the reality because we haven't lived it, if that makes sense to you.
I absolutely agree. I think we're so distracted. I think our veterans and our first responders know how bad things can really get. But I think with, like you said, just with all the technology and being so disconnected to so much of the terrible things that happen in the world, like dealing with the Taliban or, Russia, I think we are so distracted and so disconnected. And you're right. I think until things really hit us, it's going to be hard to wake up. I think our country, until it really hits home, which, God forbid, but I do think, we do really need to wake up. And I really feel like the veteran stories and the first responder stories are so eye-opening. Like, I think that's what can really help to bridge that awareness, is to be hearing your stories. Because I think it does bring awareness. It does. I think it's important. I know it's opened my eyes. I met one veteran about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He shared a story with me, combat veteran.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that's the reason why I'm doing all this today? It's because one veteran shared a story, and I thought, how could we be sending 17, 18, 19-year-old kids out there and not rebooting them at the other end, and not helping them and help rewiring them back into integrating in civilian life? I just couldn't imagine going through all that trauma and not having a warm handoff. And then plus I have survived a suicide loss in my own family. So that's what I think gave me that connection, that empathy, when I saw the high suicide rate. So I think that's what compels me to do this. It's hearing your stories. And so I'm always so grateful and honored, like, just to have you on today too, to really share your life experience. And that, it's a different background than I had, but it's so great when we can sit here and share stories and understand each other better. And
Yeah,
so thank you.
I think, thank you too, sir. I think a lot of people need to learn from this type of conversation that it's not about me being right or you being right. It's about like-minded people that have like-minded conversations that can actually grow from this particular segment and that can take some value into it. And a lot of people are like in denial, but then a lot of people, like you say, are suffering in silence because they feel too proud, because they feel like they're weak. Now, when somebody is suffering from PTSD, when the first responders, and especially the veteran community, you're not weak. The definition of PTSD is you've been so strong to be able to withhold it. You don't understand the meaning of asking for help because you've kept it on your own. So when people say, I'm good, I'm solid, you're not good, you see something that's going to trigger you, you're gonna cry like a baby. You're gonna fold like a chair. I'm sure that just like yourself, I've experienced suicide on the family side, and I'll share this with you. The kid was like 15 years old, finished school and was all happy, told his mom and everything. We found this out in 2017. And this happened in Diamond Bar. And the kid went to the park, like anything else, went around an oak tree and hung himself on a bike chain, shut his eye, everything else.
Oh my goodness.
So,
I'm so sorry. That's so sad.
So, suicide doesn't discriminate. And that's why people need to understand, right? We talk about first response, but suicide doesn't discriminate and everything else. And then the impact that it leaves, as you and I know.
Yeah.
The significant impact that stays with you forever. So, and when I say that forever, I mean forever. And people don't understand, and they choose not to understand that by supporting the first responder community, right? Firefighters, nurses, doctors, law enforcement, then the veterans, right? We are kind of the first responders. We're willing to do something that you're not willing to do.
Yeah.
You're not willing to do. Right. You say you're going to do it, but you're not going to willing to do it. You're not going to do what's expected. That takes a lot of guts. But to your point, society has played it down because ever since the George Floyd situation, it kind of escalated to a point, right? And this is why law enforcement, first responders are having issues. And even today with the rescue first responders, they're having issues because they're not being respected. They're being fired upon and everything else. So can you imagine all that stuff? And finally, with the veteran community, we feel outcast. Thank you for your service doesn't really cut it anymore. I gotta let you know. It doesn't cut it anymore because I acknowledge you, but that's as far as I get. Thank you for your service. You need a job. Okay, you don't have a high school diploma. What are your trades? What did you do? Oh, thank you for your service. Gas is expensive. How about if I put $20 in your gas tank, pay it for it? Thank you for your service. Oh, I know food is high. We can do something for you. A lot of veterans today are living hand to mouth, especially now. And I know we both live in California. Gas prices are not going to drop down. They're not. And the cost of living is not. So what we're all expecting for it to drop, until then, we all suffer from silence, correct?
Yeah, I don't know how a lot of people are making it for sure. I mean, it's tough. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful for you having the program. I mean, let me ask you this, based on this conversation we had, what have you learned from me, and what's the biggest thing that the audience can learn from this as well?
Well, I really love what you said about aligning yourself with a mentor. Like we really become like the people we hang out with.
Correct.
And I love how, again, that seems like a trait of yours to put yourself out there. And I think that is the call right there. Put yourself out there, align with somebody that you respect, find those people that can hold you accountable, that will help you be your best self. Mm-hmm. And really just don't suffer in silence. That's the isolation truly is the enemy, isn't it? It's the enemy.
It- it-
Not being alone, but the isolation part, that's different.
no, and you're right. And a lot of people don't understand that if you use the power of social media in the right way, you can have positive results like you and myself, right? Because we met, and this people don't understand that versus too busy creating a cloud chasing hierarchy that's insignificant, that doesn't bring you any value monetarily unless you're doing YouTube or TikTok. But you want to feel good about you. You want to seek validation. Why don't you validate and do something that is a call to action? Your action speaks louder than words versus, if it's not on paper, it's not real. If it's not an action, it's not real. Right.
I agree. Yeah.
And people don't understand.
Uh-oh. Oh, there you are.
Oh,
You froze
that's
for a
okay.
second.
That's okay. People think that they're the biggest things and be grateful. It's been going back and forth. I see that.
Yeah, I did hear be grateful. That's a good one.
So yeah, you got to have some, be grateful more or less. But yeah, it's been about almost an hour. I haven't cursed at all. Yeah.
Oh, well, I really appreciate your coming on. What would you want people to walk away with listening to this?
Here's what I would say to the people that they choose to listen or they choose to watch, right? Get out of your own way, reinvent yourself. Stop believing in the things that you think you are and look at the mirror of what you are. And understand that there's always somebody better than you and there's somebody less fortunate than you. But if you have a purpose like everybody else, you have a purpose, I have a purpose. Utilize that purpose to the point where you can give back to society, because at the end of the day, we're both running out of time. So when we check out, you want to go in a good place. You want to go in that good place. You want to leave a legacy. You want to leave a legacy to a point where when you get eulogized, they speak to you in your behalf of your funeral, that they praise that this individual, which is Sarah or myself, left a significant imprint in our society. And that's the type of legacy you want to leave. And that's the kind of work you want to leave, because legacies live on, but mortality, we only here for a minute, if that makes sense to you.
I love that. So what is our legacy? What are we leaving behind? Paying it forward, and I just heard you say that we will die, but our legacy can live on. And let's make it a good one.
Make it a good one, because you know what? Yeah, make it a good one, because I don't care how, everybody's bank account is different, but at the end of the day, 6 feet under fits everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
6 feet, it doesn't discriminate. 6 feet under, it fits everybody. And I think that, to your point, Sarah, this generation, especially the last 20 years since 9/11, we had the sense of humanity, but the last 10 years we have greed, and we've lost the connection of humanity and being kind to one another. So
I think that is just so huge what you're saying. If we can, like Jennifer Tracy, I always quote her. I love how she always says we're stronger together. And if we can keep banding together the people who truly want to leave a legacy that's going to make a difference to others, to collaborate, to do whatever we can to serve a cause that's bigger than ourselves. And Hiram, I have just loved talking to you. It's so good to finally meet you. And I
know Dave Weinberg, Dave Weiner.
Yeah.
So,
I do.
So he could, good man. We worked together in the VA. It's not like it used to be, but I support people like himself, and it's great meeting you as well. That's why I would like for people to really understand that this is not a front. If you're comfortable with your own self, right, people will get the message.
Yeah. They'll hear your message. They'll hear your voice. Hiram, thank you.